Hello and good afternoon from Munich, Germany. I'm Catharina van Delden, the co-founder and CEO of the company innosabi. We develop innovation management software, and during the last couple of months, of our joint experience of the pandemic, we've seen that the focus on innovation has become a lot stronger. We've seen that processes of how innovations are developed have changed, and that companies, as part of the complete digital transformation, really have to put a focus on fostering a culture of agile innovation. And what I want to do today is to share some of these experiences with you, to share with you what companies have done in order to transform their organization into an organization that is ready for innovation and that is successful in the new logic of competition. That means digital transformation. The new reality of digital transformation is especially for established companies, with a rich history and a strong DNA in the last couple of years, often faces a challenge in terms of speed. These companies are faced with new competitors who were born in a digital way and who now enter existing markets. So these companies who are basically born in a digital context, they also bring a culture to innovation and to develop new processes, products and services that are coming from kind of the mindset and the spirit of software development, and not necessarily of the industry they're entering. One example I really like in this context is the company Waymo, which you might know as the subsidiary of the company Alphabet, which is focusing on developing technologies for autonomously driving cars. So this means, that a company like Daimler, a company like Ford, a company like BMW, now not only are facing competition amongst each other, amongst other incumbents from this industry, but they're facing a competitor who is born in a digital world and comes with a DNA and culture and a way of doing things that is really deeply rooted in the way that software is developed, even though they're developing technology for cars and not only software. So for these traditional incumbents, for many large companies, that means that they cannot rely on the principles that made them successful before. They might have been successful because they followed economies of scale. They might have been successful because they really focused on high quality, high profitability. Now they have to change their mindset and have to adapt to quickly changing customer needs. They have to quickly adapt to faster product life cycles and to really the pressure of speed in all phases of the innovation process, starting with ideation, with identification of trends, over to developing ideas, evaluating them, developing prototypes, and introducing them to the market. All these steps have to be faster than ever before in order to hold up in this new age of this competition. But the real question is, well, that sounds logical from the first standpoint, but the real question is, how do you achieve that? And we see that this framework, which is provided by Boston Consulting, which we really like, really has 5 important drivers of this new logic of competition, of why being agile and why being focusing on innovation is so important in this new times of competition today. So we see that companies who focus on building a strong resilience, and this in the last couple of months has been more important than ever before, these are the ones who are successful because they can deal with market uncertainties, with quickly changing behaviors and needs. We see that companies who focus on the ability to learn and the knowledge, of to increase the knowledge of an organization and to focus on constantly developing the organization in a learning organization and always questioning the status quo. These are the ones who are successful. We see that the companies who build really powerful processes and structures that focus on speed and that boost ideation and imagination in order to bring innovations quickly to the market, these are the ones who win in the new logic of competition. And finally, who are really establishing connections between physical and digital, because I think that's something we kind of tend to forget, that digital transformation and innovation strategies in a digital world do not only focus on digital, they have to connect the physical and the digital world. And finally, and this is kind of the core of what I want to talk to you today about, is they have to build innovation ecosystems. They have to reach out to the relevant people in their ecosystem, even though if they might not have been working with them before, to find the relevant knowledge, to find the best ideas, to find the brightest minds, and to bring these people together. And not only work in the boundaries of the organization, but to reach out and to build a powerful network in the ecosystem that drives innovation. So they would want to collaborate with suppliers, with customers, with employees who were not involved before, or even with people who they didn't have any connection with before, just because they have a good idea. So if you want to tackle this transformation, if you really want to start is to adapt your company to these ever-changing environments of digital transformation and to really build an innovation-first company, you need to start with analyzing and understanding the status quo. You need to talk to lots of people and understand what is your organization already doing in terms of initiatives, in terms of programs, what is and it's good if there are many actually distributed. You don't have to expect, that it's all already interconnected and interlinked. But if you have people who are driving innovation initiatives, that's amazing. Find them and talk to them what they're doing. Who is involved and who's responsible? What kind of tools and solutions do you already have in place to drive innovation? Do you have, for example, customer communities where you can discuss new ideas? Do you have supplier councils where you find new innovations that your suppliers develop? And finally, how is your team approaching innovation today? What are the structures? What's the kind of organization that might foster, or even as the status quo, might hinder innovation as of today? And how is the decision-making process behind it? And finally, what's kind of the culture? What's the way things are done? How culture often is defined in your company when it comes to innovation? Who has the relevant knowledge? How do you access it? How do you find these people? How do you bring them together to collaborate or not? So once you kind of have a better understanding of where you are as a company, and now that you know what is already in place, you want to, of course, define the way how to help your organization change into an innovation-first company and really focus on the culture that is needed to do so. So really important in this context is kind of not to think of a strategy, of a vision that changes everything at once, because that won't work. You need to firstly identify what are processes, what are tools that you already have that kind of help you to achieve your vision, to achieve your goal. And what's the core DNA of your company that you want to keep the same, that needs to be continued? What you stand for? Because really implementing an innovation process and the kind of working on how the culture for that should be is a very individual process for every company. No innovation process between two companies will ever be the same, because it's such an identifying part and component of a company culture. So in order to achieve, to kind of work on the strategy and the vision of how you want to achieve to transform your company, it's always helpful to start with one singular use case and to make that successful, to kind of build the proof that the way you want to go is the correct one. And this is really a test and a proof that people can use internally for communication, that they can follow, and that you can build on. So you probably, in the context of developing that strategy, you need to ask yourself, what kind of innovation are we focusing on? Do we what are the search fields? What are the topics we want to focus on? Which business goals are affected? You need to ask yourself, what do I need to make this happen? Who do I need to involve? What kind of structures do I need to put in place? What kind of how do I communicate it? How do I approach it? And finally, what kind of requirements do I need to fulfill? So once you've asked yourself these questions and you've found answers, the first step you want to focus on, and that is the most important to make your focus on a culture of innovation successful, is communication. So you have to be aware that transforming, that putting a focus on an innovation culture really only is possible with top management support. If the whole organization doesn't feel that this is truly where the whole organization should go, wants to go, where top management wants to go, then it will not happen. So it's really important to get massive leadership support in driving your innovation culture strategy. But after that, obviously, it's not enough if only a few top management people stand behind this approach and drive it. Really important is to reach the whole organization. And the way to do that very often is twofold. One is in your communication to focus on the intrinsic side of things, to help people understand that this is not just another business task they need to work on, that this is something very intrinsically important to them in terms of, on the one hand, that this is their future as well, because it's the future of the company. And if they work in the company, it's their future. And on the other hand, that it's really also their task and their responsibility. And it's not only a few people in management taking these decisions, but that it's every single one in the organization who needs to drive the focus on innovation and to create the company of the future. And in order to get this message across and to get it across the whole organization, it has been proven successful to find evangelists, to find mentors, and to build kind of an evangelist network to drive innovation. Well, now this has been a lot of talk on kind of a top level bird's eye view. And I do want to bring a couple of very concrete examples in this context as well. The first one I brought to you is from the chemical giant company Bayer. And they faced the challenge to transform a 150-year-old organization with over 100,000 employees. And you can imagine to bring change to such an organization is really quite a task. So at the core of the solution they found is to create a network of volunteer ambassadors and coaches throughout the whole company who have taken collective responsibility for making innovation happen. And the way that works in the first step in this WeSolve approach is that employees can post their business challenges, and people from other departments, from other areas of the organization can help solve these challenges. And so this really drives cross-company collaboration and fosters innovation, even in fields, where employees might not have expected that they are able to help each other. But very often it is so much faster to transfer knowledge from one field to another than to solve a challenge from day one in just the one field again. So Bayer has built on that over the years, and has kind of larger, made the approach larger by involving more and more people, so that by the end of 2018, over 700 ideas were already selected and implemented and put into action. And 2020, more than 40,000 employees have been using this platform. And I think this is really showing the impact that such an approach can have. So the question behind this is, how do you get such approach, to really be implemented throughout the whole company, to have such a large number of people participate and feel responsible for the future of their company? So I think that's like 3 hard factors that need to be considered. Is that employees need time, space, and resources. And that's kind of obvious, I think. But the soft factor in this might be even more important. Is if you expect from your employees that they drive innovation, each and every single one of them, and that they are in this process of constant learning, of reaching out in their ecosystem to find collaborators, you need to put a lot of trust in your people. You need to make give them the power to make decisions. So trust and empowerment are really the key keywords here. Another example I wanted to quickly present to you is coming from Siemens. Siemens started with the so-called internal crowdfunding approach. So employees were able to submit ideas to questions and also allocate the resources needed to do so. So the budget was not contributed or distributed by top management anymore, but by everybody who contributed on this platform. And this is how really a sense of responsibility was given to the employees, that they have the ability to influence what is implemented and what projects will happen. And this is how they accelerated the realization of ideas. So behind this approach, behind the question of how to drive agile innovation in a company, after you talk about communication, about how to start, what's your vision, very often the next question is, but what kind of technology do you need behind that? What do you need to actually make it happen, to make it tangible? And yes, the technology is important, but no technology will ever be the only and the most important success factor. It can help by kind of putting into action, but without the plan and the communication that we just talked about, it doesn't help. But once you've done that homework, once you've come to the point to actually think about the technology, it does play an important role to kind of intelligently bring together that ecosystem that is needed to drive innovation. So a technology needs to be able to connect various groups of stakeholders. Could be customers, could be employees, could be the network like startups, universities. Technology has to be able to connect to data sources like patent data, blogs on innovation, on new trends. It could connect to startup data sources, and most important, to data sources that are already existing in your organization. Maybe you've had like an idea program for years already, and these ideas are still valuable, maybe, but they need to be found in the right context. So to connect to these kind of data, that's important. And finally, it needs to be able to show processes along the initiatives and the innovation programs that you have in place, because the crowdfunding will work differently than, let's say, an idea management, than an innovation award, than a startup or a university corporation. And so for each of these initiatives and for collaboration with people in your network, you need separate processes, and the technology needs to be able to adjust that. And of course, it needs to be able to scale from that very first use case we talked about to a rather large ecosystem and to a rather large base of people involved in initiatives represented. So you need to make sure that the technology is able to kind of grow with you and your approach. Finally, and this is maybe sometimes a bit too hyped, I think, but it's still important to think about, is that it needs to have the intelligence to identify connections between all these information that are coming into this innovation ecosystem platform. So it needs to have the intelligence to see, let's say, when an employee talks about a certain technology, to see that the company already holds a patent on it, or that there has been a collaboration with the startup in that context, or maybe that there's an event coming up on this topic in their area. So it's really important that there's some kind of intelligence, ideally artificial intelligence, that helps to make these connections and to continuously learn how those connections look like. As a final example of a company who has done this very successfully, again, Siemens, because they didn't stop with the quick starter that you just saw. They developed that into such an innovation ecosystem where the quick starter is one important initiative and component. But by now, they have launched just in June 2020, and they have 64,000 active users on the platforms. They have more than 80 innovation campaigns, 6,000 ideas, and it really has become the central hub for all innovation activities and initiatives at Siemens. And it's the central hub for all innovation, communication regarding innovation, for all organization and the connections offline and online, and mirrors several use cases across the company, like innovation funding, like innovation awards, ideation campaigns, idea management, and so on. So this is really a shining example of how a company can build an innovation ecosystem and therefore foster their agile innovation company culture. So this is actually my last point, is that a company really should kind of constantly put this approach into question and constantly develop it and further develop it, and kind of don't just, if you've reached, let's say, like Siemens, this innovation ecosystem, to say, okay, this is it, we are done. But to stay, we call it always in beta, and to keep driving and developing it. As a final word, where does all this information and this experience, where does it come from? It comes actually from my work with my company, innosabi. We do provide innovation software, innovation management software internationally for large to very large organizations like, let's say, Siemens, Bayer, Daimler, Telekom. We have been founded in Munich in 2010, and as of today, have around 60 employees headquartered in Munich. This is how you can reach me, and I'd be more than happy to connect with you on LinkedIn and to continue the discussion that we have today. Just reach out to me. You find me on basically every social media platform that you look out for. And as a final note, I do want to offer you to take a look at our new book, which is Connect the Dots. And on the bottom right, you see the link innosabi.com/connect the dots, where you basically can see what I've just talked about in a larger form of a book. So with this, I'm looking forward to your questions. I'm looking forward to hear your experience, how your company deals with innovation. Thank you.
Hi, Katharina. How are you?
Hi, Jamie. Hi, I'm really good. How are you?
I'm great. I love that session. I think I was profusely writing down. I had my OneNote open. I was also trying to watch the chat with over 500 people have joined the session, which is great, as well as the Q&A. And I think one of the big standout moments for me in it was the idea of that innovation ecosystem, and where you had the data, the people, and the initiatives, because I don't know about you, but sometimes people find the word innovation intimidating, or, you know, some people clog up, whereas others embrace it. And I think having those simple tactics around how to do it and how to build that ecosystem is really, really important. So I'm going to jump into the Q&A. The chat was great. There was some really great dialogue there about what happens when, you know, those that are on it that say, we've always done it this way though. So let me have a little look here at the chat and see what we have at the top. So the top question we have, I'm just going to pop it up on the screen, is what can you do to encourage innovation at an organization when C-level leadership are not as eager? It's a really good question.
It is. Because very often you hear C-level executives talk about how the organization does not want to commit to innovation, but actually in reality, I see it the other way around quite just as often, to be honest. Very often also in companies that maybe stem from a family organization and then have grown, you know, and say, okay, we have been very innovative a couple of years back, but then they kind of kept at a certain standard. The answer to that actually connects something that now that we started our discussion popped up to me, that in my talk, I didn't put sufficient emphasis on it. So maybe that's a good way to add on it as well, you know, because Matthias talked so much about open innovation in the event industry. And I realized in my talk, I focused obviously more on the innovation culture inside a company. But I think what you really need to do is to bring these two, well, I kind of was implying that open innovation is the answer, you know, but what was missing in my opinion, is that, you know, when Matthias, he specifically also addresses the company, you know, to really talk to customers, to suppliers, to startup, to universities, to people who have not been involved before with your company, and who bring completely new ideas, and to reach out in your own industry and connect, you know, and kind of this really open approach. And actually this, coming back to the question, what can you do if your leaders are not as eager to drive innovation? I think this is actually that every single person can start. You know, you can start talking to your customers. You can start talking to people who just for inspiration. You know, for example, I try to go on a virtual coffee date daily with people I don't know. So I kind of block half an hour in my calendar to get to know people who I don't know yet. Actually, this is an invitation to everybody who's listening.
As everyone's probably on your LinkedIn now messaging you saying, are you available tomorrow?
No, but I think this is, and then you have arguments also towards top management, you know, said, well, this is not just my idea. It's not just something I just thought about doing my job, but it's really what our customers are telling us. This is what our market's telling us, and this is why you need to take it seriously. And I think by this already you can kind of start bringing that culture of openness, of collaboration into your own organization, and not waiting for top management to do it for you.
Yeah, and I think that data point is really important. You have to have analytics or something to back it up. So speak to your customers, speak to your wider community, so that you can fight that corner per se. So the next one we have here is, what type of timeline are you looking at when you think of innovation? That's maybe as how long is a piece of string. I suppose it depends on a number of variables.
I'm tempted. I saw that question before and I was tempted to answer indefinite. Yeah. Because innovation doesn't really end, does it? You know, if you basically start reinventing yourself, you start reinventing your product range, your services, your company, but just because you've reached a certain milestone of you've done it once, that doesn't mean you're done. You know, I try to describe that as always in beta in my talk, you know, and you really always keep pushing what's next, what's the next milestone. And I'm experienced that at innosabi as well, as a very powerful driver for innovation, that you never kind of sit back and relax and say, oh, that's a nice success, we've done it. No, well, let's do it like this for the next 10 years, you know.
Yeah.
But really to constantly have the urge to learn, to reinvent, to kind of think from new angles and to push the new. And so this is why, well, actually why I'd say indefinite, but I think the answer that might have been expected a bit more is kind of, what time do you need to work on innovation? And there actually, I think smaller changes and incremental innovation, which means really improving on the status quo and not kind of reinventing the whole industry or the whole product range, but inventing in a certain space that is already existing. That can be done in a very quick pace. It can be done probably in a matter of days. You know, you can just start to experiment and start to put new ideas in front of your customers and your ecosystem. If you want to work on disruptive innovation that really changes things, how things are done in a complete way, kind of puts business model into question. Obviously, speed is still the success factor, so you should be quick, but that, especially if you're doing it with a organization that already has a structure and that is already established, you need to give it some time to kind of take the whole organization on board and to really test it with your customers, think it through, and bring it to the market. That doesn't mean while you're developing that type of innovation, it has to be inside your organization only and a complete secret. That's kind of the old way of thinking that we have about innovation, you know, that it has to be the big secret. And it's basically a big boom once you come to the market. But I think this is one of the fundamental changes that we're seeing, that the process of developing a new product or service really is open from day one, and you communicate, you look for collaborators, you look for people who to partner up with. And so that means maybe there is not like this one official date when you go out and communicate, but it's throughout, you know, the whole process.
Yeah, and it's a great way of looking at it, that you're nearly always in beta, you know, that and it's not a criticism. I know we've all been in circumstances where you're trying to help people evolve something and they sometimes see it as a criticism, and it's not to say, you know, nothing is ever perfect. So if you can continue to look at it and finesse it and get your customers or your clients involved, that will only help.
Yeah. Actually, sorry, one remark on that. I got very negative feedback from our clients when I talk about always in beta, because, well, we're a software company and they say, we want your software to work, you know. So many people actually, they assume that beta means doesn't work or not finished, you know. But what we mean when we say always in beta, it's more like constantly questioning the status quo. So, and just, it actually never occurred to me when we started talking about always in beta that, you know, our customers might not see it that positively.
The sales might drop.
Yeah, so probably it's kind of a mindset, you know, of how we look on innovation. That's how you understand that phrase. So that kind of as a follow-up to your remark.
That's very, very valid. Okay, so the next one we have here, it's great that people can vote and pop them to the top. So what could be a good way to start an innovation process in a small company?
In a small company, well, I think there are arguments that it could be easier, but also it could be harder to start. Easier in a way that, you know, a small company doesn't have the large processes and hierarchies that large companies have, and that you probably need to convince or cross in order to start a certain innovation project. So from that angle, for a small company, it could be a lot easier. From the angle of, you know, that also kind of the power to the market and the resources and time capacity, they're probably not as plentiful as a large organization. So it's, you know, you really have to take care of your resources, and that could hinder innovation. So taking that into account, I would actually it sounds like my fallback answer, but I say start talking to people, start talking to customers, start talking to partners. And this is, in my opinion, always the first step, is to open up, to be open for new ideas, for new inspiration, and also to be open to the thought that innovation does not only have to come from within that company, especially if it's a small company. You know, probably that small company exists because it has some very unique offerings and talents, and but it also doesn't mean it does have to do everything on its own, but that it makes sense to open up and to partner.
Yeah, there are no limitations unless you put it on it. So I think that's good to reach out, to speak to other companies, your customers. And, you know, when we talk about innovation and people coming with ideas, it's not that finished article. So with more collaboration and more minds together, that's why we love this open innovation platform idea, because that's where the magic happens. It's when you get various different collaborators working together for a common goal. So it's definitely something that we're very excited about. Okay, what have we got next? We've got a message here from John. Does the method process adjust between corporate and non-profit? They are very different work cultures.
That is very true. That is very true. And probably you would think very different motivations. You know, what you think employees in a corporate, they focus on increasing profitability and efficiency, and in a nonprofit you would think they focus on doing good. But I actually think, and this conversation in the business world has been a lot more intense in the last year, is that in both types of organization you need to find a purpose that the company, why the company exists and what it's working for. And while in a nonprofit that seems very obvious, in corporate not as much. And I think it's kind of a new way of thinking as well, because we don't come from a world, you know, where a corporation has to kind of from a thinking that a corporation has to make sense apart from making profit. And I think this actually goes hand in hand with the ecosystem approach. Now that we're really realizing with digital technologies, we're more connected than ever before, and that we kind of see the impact that corporations have on all of the stakeholders who are involved with that corporation. So it could be the customers, could be politics, could be people who kind of are affected by the actions of that corporation, that it becomes a lot more clearer because of the digital connection, that it's important that a company is so much more, and especially that it drives a purpose that is important to its employees and to its customers. And coming from that, I think once you look at it from what's the purpose of an organization angle, the processes again are very similar. What I do see, but as a difference, is that the process is similar in terms of opening up, finding partners, but that sometimes nonprofits have a wider range of possibilities to experiment. So one of my favorite examples is the World Food Program, who is an innovation incubator here in Munich. And they say, well, in order to stop hunger and in order to really help people who are starving and who are in relevant need, they very often are even encouraged to try innovation that maybe a corporate would not be allowed to do from a legal perspective. So one example, well, we have this huge, in Germany, we have a huge debate on self-driving cars and self-driving trucks and what are the rules and regulations. And well, then I've heard of one example where a certain community, I'm trying to remember where that was, but it was, well, not in Germany. I'll try to find out later on, where a certain community was not able to reach them anymore because the path was basically mined. So if a truck would have crossed that, it's very possible that a mine goes off. So obviously they didn't want to send truck drivers with the necessary supplies for that community, but they were able to send self-driving trucks, you know. And And I think this is a really exciting example of how in nonprofits, sometimes the circumstances allow for more experimental freedom to try out innovation, because, you know, the pressure to deliver is so much higher. So if that truck with supplies doesn't reach the community, they'll starve, you know. And in Germany, well, if the truck has a driver or not, it's like not as much of a difference as there.
Yeah, I love that analogy. Annie has asked, and I've actually saw it in a lot of chats, it's not pertaining to this session, is the Convening Leaders playlist is so energizing. Is it on Spotify? It's not on Spotify yet, but we have had a lot of internal comms. So we are hoping to put together a playlist and send it out. Annie, you and your peers will be pleased to know. So the next
I want
question,
to listen to it.
Yeah, there's a lot of desk dancing going on over the last couple of days. So the next question we have is from Bill. Where do you draw inspiration from that results in new ideas, and what does it require of you to make it happen? I love this question, and there was lots you probably saw yourself in the chat on where's your inspirational environment. So I think that's a great question.
Yeah, I think well, inspiration very often comes from new experiences, no? From meeting new people, from traveling, from submerging yourself in environments that you've not been in before. And if you look at the last couple of, well, at least my world, I'm sure pretty much everybody else, the last couple of months, that was limited to my department and maybe the supermarket. So basically, due to the pandemic situation, you know, my range, or all of our ranges, to be exposed to new experiences is really getting really small. So I think now even more it's important to find that inspiration through online dialogue and through connection, because we're not able to have it by travel anymore, let's say, or by visiting a museum. So I think it's really important to specifically look for things that you're not familiar with, you know, to see where other topics I can inform myself about, you know, that I maybe have no connection to. Am I able to visit a virtual museum maybe on artists that I've not seen before, to participate in a discussion like ours, or reach out for that virtual coffee with people you didn't know before. And so I think it's really, you have to make a conscious effort to provide a space that provides you with new inspiration, even though you're sitting at home all the time.
Yeah. Which often is outside of our comfort zone. Like you said, experiencing new things. And we are slightly limited at the minute. We have been talking about escapism, and also when does it become not escapism? You know, if you do the same thing every day to escape, there becomes a point where you're not escaping, you're just back into your routine. So I think you have to just do what works for you and throw yourself out of that comfort zone and be inquisitive. So we have one from Sam. We've about 5 or 6 minutes left. So Sam, here we've got, how do you overcome a revenue profitability organization mindset in short term to adopt always in beta or innovation mindset for the long term?
That is actually a huge question. Not easy to tackle, a huge challenge. And first of all, I do want to point out that any innovation approach, of course, doesn't exist just for the fun of innovation. You know, in organizations, you should not forget that the ultimate goal of that organization is to pay the salaries of everybody who's working there, to produce the products that are needed by the market, the services. So ultimately, any innovation should have the goal to be profitable at some point in time and to generate significant revenue. And if you look at the textbook innovation definition of innovation, that's exactly that. That's a good idea that comes to the market and is successful at the market. And we kind of tend to forget that. You know, it's we tend to think of innovation as kind of a fun playground, and especially because so many organizations use it as a marketing communication channel as well. You know, that's not so much about if the innovation is actually successful. It's more about that they are doing it and being able to position themselves as an innovative company.
Yeah.
So actually, I would say if you do it right, revenue profitability mindset of a company is exactly the mindset you need to develop successful innovation. But I believe behind that question is more, is kind of a concern that, of course, in the beginning, you need more freedom. In the beginning, you need to be allowed to invest in new ideas and maybe not to have successful couple for a certain time. And not that you don't have to be successful from day one, profitable from day one. And I think this is possible to overcome if you are able to show the future success of your innovation. If you say, well, we have this idea, it has traction, and there's a need in the market, and it's really being valued, and so because people need it, they spend money for it. And I think if you can prove that, you have the right argument for any CEO that looks at profitability and revenue.
And that kind of relates back to what you said earlier on about that purpose. And, you know, I'm sure a lot of people have read the book. We had him speaking at CL before, Simon Sinek's book on Start With Why, that purpose. So if you have the why as to what this innovation is going to deliver, back to the data as well. And I think the other thing to bear in mind, and I don't know if you agree, Catharina, is not all innovation costs a lot of money. Some people think, oh, innovation, we don't have the budget for that. So a lot of it.
I saw lots of thumbs up coming up for that.
Yeah, like it doesn't always have to cost a lot of money, and it could be small things. So we do have to be change makers. I know there was a lot of comments in the chat around that, and don't be afraid of it is probably another thing as well. So we only have a few more minutes left. So Katie's going to move to polls to find out what people are thinking. Is there any thing you would like us to finish on, or anything, having done this now, the session and the Q&A, and have experienced this? Is there anything you feel that you'd like to highlight, or any of your light bulb moments over the last little while?
Well, for me, it's really even this type of format, you know, that we are having a digital conversation, and we are able to involve everybody who is participating so much more than before. Even, I believe, more than if we are actually live in front of people and like handing out the microphone, and then you need to look who is, and you don't know what they will be asking, and if people are supporting that question. So that's kind of my highlight, that I believe, you know, even though we are forced to be more digital, we should really see the positive in that, and to enjoy that exchange and openness, you know. And I think this session has really proven it by the amazing participation of everybody. It's so much fun.
Yeah, there was a session on yesterday, I think it was yesterday, and it was about, you know, listening is a sign of respect. And I think we have to be present, we have to listen to each other, and we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, so we should definitely be listening more than we're talking. But from me, from all of us at PCMA, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed the session, the dialogue with yourself, the engagement on the chat has been great, and the questions. So big shout out to all of our attendees, and thank you so much for that, and to Katie for moderating the chat so well. We have got a poll up, so we would encourage you all to link in with that. As Catharina had said before, she shared her LinkedIn credentials, so do reach out. I know I'm definitely going to be sending you a message, Catharina, to have that informal coffee. And thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the rest of CL as well as everyone else.
Thank you. We should add, actually, use the PCMA platform first to message, and then LinkedIn.
Absolutely. And check out the response. Yes, Felix has shared the link, so check out the response room, have a look in the tech talks, it's in there as well, and collaborate and come together. Thanks, Catharina. Take care.
You too. Bye. Bye.